Welcome to This Old App, a podcast about learning, coding, smashing stuff together, breaking things apart, startups, failing, winning, and any other buzzwords we can think of.
Hey, Randy.
Hey.
All right. So following up on the previous discussion we had regarding the startups for the Gator Big Idea competition. Previously, we talked about some business plans that had some serious deficiencies in them, both from a technical standpoint and also from a idea standpoint. This time, I think I want to talk about the two that were better, it's funny because there's less to talk about when they're better, but also talk about just how the judging went and everything that went down. So really, there's not much difference between the two good ones. I'll talk about them in contrast to everything we talked about before. These two were very professionally proofread. Any spelling errors were sprinkled just here and there, just a couple, if any. It definitely looked like it had been proofread. One of them. So we'll start talking about them separately. One of them it's essentially a medical device for patients that have lost upper extremity or total lock-in syndrome. And it essentially combines EEG and eye tracking for communication and interaction purposes. There are other competitors in the market that do similar things, but nobody at this point ties in EEG and eye tracking. They either do eye tracking with blinks for confirmation or for selecting, or they do just EEG. Nobody combines the two.
What is the problem they're solving?
They're solving for patients that have upper extremity loss or locked-in syndrome, which means you have nothing but eye movement, essentially.
Okay.
Just their ability to communicate.
Okay.
This was significantly the longest business plan. And to some degree, it's because it was a bit medical and a bit scientific and mechanical and all that, and explaining everything.
Is this their first ever competition or presentation, or have they done it before?
I did not get the impression. So I'll put it this way: I did not get the impression that they had done this before. I do get the impression that they had written scientific papers before. Because this read almost like a scientific paper. But like I said, very professionally done, clean, just a little heavy at times.
Sure.
And a lot of talk about research and which is okay. I'm okay with that when you're talking about medical devices, but at the end of the day, you don't need to convince me a lot of them scientific, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to, I probably won't be able to read too much into it. However, everything about this product is theoretical. So they do not have a prototype. All they have is what the research they've done. And I pressed them. So we're recording this after the verbal sessions, the presentation.
Yeah, let's not talk about.
We'll talk about the business plans first.
Yeah.
So the business plan itself went fine. Like I said, very technical but theoretical. There was also no mention of any advisors. Every other business plan had advisors. This had no mention of advisors, but these are PhD candidate level students, I think, if I remember right. So that was certainly one of my questions is in reading it is, okay, I'm sure you're getting advice. I just don't know from who. The other positive thing I'll say about this was the only business plan that addressed COVID-19. And I would say, I don't know this for a fact, but I would say that they had a chance to refine these business plans before this final judging. So they had time within the last 2-3 weeks before they had to submit them, probably. So there was time to add stuff to it, but this was the only one that addressed it. And it addressed it decently. It's medical manufacturing, so it's going to need parts from everywhere.
These are these two PhD candidates at University of Florida?
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know the intricacies of all this, but isn't there a level of ownership that the university has when they're PhD students?
From what I understand from the university is very good about sharing, is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Because they want to encourage innovation. So the entrepreneurial center that I talk about, one of the people that I've talked to there before, who kind of runs the whole center, his previous job and his current job is intellectual property. Mm-hmm. So he was brought in to monetize the intellectual property and to figure out ways to make it worthwhile for students and faculty to pursue things that have that market.
I mean, obviously, they're not doing it under the cloak of darkness by going to the university and
not at all
business plan. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just always like, there's always this weird ground I've seen with even professors starting side businesses. I've been hired by one in the past. I'm like, who owns this? You're working with the university. This is what you do research on, but you created an LLC. It's just always interesting. Intellectual property around universities is an interesting subject, but
I'll say just from talking to them, they seem to have acknowledged the problem and are trying to figure out the best way to handle it that works for everybody. I know that's the theory I've heard. How does it work in practice? I don't know. But that's that they seem to be very open to giving students and faculty more leeway to do so, and more ownership. So, but yeah, that was that one. Like I said, the thickest one, and it's the one I had tagged as probably the best one, just in an overall look, because at the end of the day, it's the most serious one. Mm-hmm. It's the one that you look at and you go, sure, it's got a market. It meets a serious need, so on and so forth. So just it checks all the easy boxes. The next one, again, very well written, very polished. You definitely got the feeling that this had been through the ringer a couple times. And in reading everything that happened and everything in it, it's been through a couple of startup competitions.
Yeah.
So there's a level of polish on this one. The founder was a University of Florida student entrepreneur for 2018. And it was for this business. So this business has been around a little while. But essentially what this is, and the generic way I will put this, although it's not a secret, it's not a secret. So I'm going to just tell you what it is, because it's been on the news. It's been everywhere. It's essentially a corkscrew for coconuts. So imagine a corkscrew with a serrated circular saw edge around the corkscrew, so that you stick the corkscrew in, you twist, and then you start twisting, and you essentially can core a green coconut or a Thai coconut. And the idea for that is so that it's easier to put rum in it, or to get water out, or Um, in other words, it's a way to get natural coconut water as opposed to pasteurized, what you get out of bottles, out of the cartons, and so on and so forth.
And that's a
Um,
problem now because of why?
because there is no product on the market that does this well. As far as if somebody wants fresh coconut water,
Mm-hmm.
they can't really. You have choices. You have what's called a coconut knife, but it's a fairly straightforward. Essentially a pick, and pick on a round surface. You can imagine is not very easy to use. You can use a machete to open a coconut. Um, this particular founder came across us and devoted his idea to this because he started to drink coconut water to get rid of high blood pressure. I think, if I remember right.
Now he stole this idea from Gilligan's Island, or where did he get it? So, like, I'm only questioning, like, so this is just a better engineered cutting device, is what you're saying for this
Yeah,
problem.
it essentially cores into a coconut, and nothing really exists that does that. Like I said, there's something that's a pick that does it. You can use a machete, but that requires some level of skill. This doesn't
Okay,
require a lot of skill. Seeing him use it, it requires a little bit of strength, but it doesn't require necessarily skill.
definitely has a patent
Um,
on it, right?
he's got the patent on it. He's it, this is something he has built. He has prototypes for. He has 900 pre-orders for. He has demoed it in local grocery stores. Um, he's talked to 3, maybe 4 different buyers for regional supermarkets, and they're all interested in it and putting it next to the coconuts in their produce section. So this is a well-formed idea. This thing is ready to go. The only question is, how big is the market?
Why? Yeah, like, this is one of those where I'm like, why don't you just go to OXO and sell it to them?
Because, I, I mean, literally, he said his exit strategy is to sell it to a kitchen gadget company. So
Yeah,
yes, that's the answer. But sometimes to do that, you have to prove that there's a market. So you go ahead and produce it, and then you get bought out, which is perfectly fine. Um, but yeah, it's like I said, this is polished. In the operation plan, it shows every part and the cost of every part to produce.
mm-hmm.
Um, this thing was as rock solid as it could be. You just had to figure out what the market is. I had the biggest question I had is when talking about the market, because that's the biggest question mark. There's a nice chart here showing a nice upward to the right curve for sales of coconut water, and this is packaged coconut water,
Mm-hmm.
but a nice upward to the right curve. However, that chart ends in 2013.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, yes, I see the up and to the right curve of the market, but it's 7-year-old data. So I don't know if this was a fad and it's faded.
Definitely, it
This
was a
chart tells me
fad.
nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah, this chart tells me nothing, and it hints that there's not newer data because it was a fad.
yeah. Like, if
Um,
someone's going to enter a competition with data that ends in 2013, they're bullshitting you.
well, let's go ahead and step forward. Unless you've got something else to say, let's step forward a little bit to the verbal, to the presentational,
Yes. Now
um,
I got to hear
because
this. I have to hear how this plays out. Well,
yeah.
here,
So
let me ask this one question
yeah,
before. The point of this is a competition to be to have your to have your business plan be better, not your product be better, right?
at the end of the day, it's going to be the product because it's both the
Uh,
written plan and it's the presentation. So at the end of the day, what we're judging on is, and I think we're going to hear lawnmowers for the next 15, 20 minutes. Um,
oh, it's
what
better
we're,
than
what,
screaming kids, so that's fine. That's
no
what I
kidding.
hear.
Um, the what we're judging on is the viability of the business. Is this something that would be good to put money towards? So yes, it's business plan, but it's also product.
What do the winners
So,
get?
so what we were doing was that it was a final 16. We got 4 of the 16, and we were told to choose the top one. And there were 4 groups of 4. So those top 4 all got put into a final 4. A separate panel of judges judged those, and then the winner got 25,000. The second place got 10,000. Third maybe 5,000. Then 1,000, I think.
No
and there were a couple
attached.
other $1,000 rewards as well for different categories. As far as I know, I believe it was not equity. It was grants.
Okay.
Because that's the way Aspire EDU was. When we would win ours, every single one of them was a grant. It wasn't equity purchase.
Yeah.
Because 25,000 is too little for really equity. I mean, especially like 5,000 is too little for an equity purchase. So we got these together, and as we talked about last time, I finished all the judging on the written business plans before we got to the presentations, and it was a clear separation. You had the medical device and the coconut opener for 2 as the top 2, and then the other 2 we had from last week, which was the nutritional monitor and the device relationship wellness app. Movement sort of thing. So 2 distinct groups, 2 that were pretty solid and 2 that weren't. We went to the presentations. Go ahead.
So just remind me, the 4 that we discussed were the top 4?
Were 4 of the top 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we were going to choose
about
one
the
of
worst
those.
2 and the top 2 of those 16.
Right.
Okay.
Worst 2 and top 2 of those 4 that we got. We only got 4. Our group of judges only got 4.
I see. Okay.
So of that group of 4, we had 2 clear separation, 2 and 2. Presentations, we'll talk in reverse order now. Presentations, again, the coconut presentation, fine. This guy's been through it before. He had it. He had answers down. He had the little kitschy things that you do during a presentation sometime when you've got a little bit of confidence in what you're doing, like literally during the presentation saying, I'll take your questions now. While I take your questions, I'm going to open this coconut. And he uses the product right as we're asking the questions, just to show that, hey, this is how the product works.
So he's doing the Shark Tank approach.
Yeah. It's kind of what it felt like. And if we had been in there in person, I'm sure he would have handed us each a coconut. So the presentation went fine. I asked my question about, okay, this chart, not very helpful. It hints at a fad. And then in the presentation itself, he had a better chart that ended in 2017 data. Still up and to the right, didn't really show a lot of slowdown. Yeah. But I said, hey, this data is 3 years old. And yeah, I don't expect a 2020 chart, but I'd kind of like a 2019 chart.
Yeah.
Because it kind of hints at a downturn. He's like, this is the best data I could find. According to the buyers I'm talking to, they don't see a decrease in the purchase of coconuts or coconut water. But this is the best data I could find. I'm like, okay. Again, that answer was tempered by the fact that he's literally talked to 4 buyers from regional supermarkets. So he's got potential buyers on board and listed as part of his advisory board. So all stuff that's like, you know what? Everything is here. This is so my final thought was, this is going to be a successful business. I don't have a doubt of that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how big it is. So that's that one. There's not a lot to say because it was polished. It was ready to go. When we were doing this circuit with Aspire EDU, we would run into companies like this that had been through the circuit a few times. Their ideas weren't better than ours, but their polish was better than ours. They had more proven than we did, and eventually we became them. We a year in, we had a product out there. We had clients. We started to see how that worked. The presentation for the medical device was very good. One thing I will say that I didn't say before, these gentlemen knew their market. They knew the community around the caregivers for these devices. So it wasn't just here's a problem, let's solve it, but they also understood how do you this is a word of mouth market, and this is insurance paid devices that people are buying, and they knew how they had to get in. And this one also not extremely large market. The locked in syndrome, where all you can move is like your maybe your face muscles, maybe just your eyes.
Yeah,
there's 25,000 cases a year. That's it. There are 4 million, I think, patients a year that have upper extremity loss. So they could use a different version of the product, a cheaper version of the product. But that's also a more contested market because it's a larger market. In talking to these guys knew their stuff. Like I said, the paper read like a scientific paper. These guys knew their stuff. I did ask about advisors. I said, listen, you have to have had advisors along the way. There's nothing listed here that shows you have any support. And they said, listen, we know what stage of the business we're at. We're still at this stage where we're trying to prove it. So we haven't even filed an LLC yet. So we didn't want to bring anybody on as an advisor without having an actual business in place. But yeah, we talk to we have professors that are interested in working with us on this, and so on and so forth. So for the most part, they answered the question. I think overall, if this had been slightly further down the road, where it was less theoretical and more proven, if they even had just a prototype, it might have won. Or if the market of locked in had been bigger, it might have won.
Yeah.
But there was too much theory and potentially too small a market. And we won't talk about the other judges just yet for that one. The nutritional monitor one, I pushed those guys. The presentation was fine. I pushed those guys on exactly what we talked about: privacy concerns of wearing a monitor, zero friction. I pushed them on all the different negative points I had on them, and they did a decent job of fielding the questions. They did not have answers that changed my mind. Mm-hmm. So if that makes sense, they understood the question. They understood it was a weakness. They didn't have an answer. But they talked around it well enough to where I felt that they're trying here. They're not just blowing smoke. They know what's going on here, and they even backed off the zero friction a little. They're like, yeah, that's a marketing term. I'm like, okay, well, just know what you're promising and what you're delivering, and they don't match. So when I hit that as a consumer, I run the other way. Because as a consumer, I see zero friction. I expect no effort. And there is no part of any of this that is no effort. But they were fine. And then the final presentation was, again, the device relationship, wellness, idea, movement, product. Solid presentation, a lot more solid than the written business plan itself. And I did bring up, hey guys, this sounds like a movement. It sounds like a movement that you got to build before you build a product. And he's like, you're right. And that's why we show our growth as being so slow, because we don't expect that we're going to be able to grow this thing until there's momentum behind a movement to do this.
Yeah.
So we're going to work on the movement, but we're going to have the app there as well.
Remind me of this one again. I'm just trying to get all these.
Yeah, this was one that instead of being like your Apple Digital Wellness app or your Android Digital Wellness app that or other apps out there that restrict what you can do. You can only look at Facebook 1 hour a day, things like that.
Yeah.
It kind of guides you instead. It what it does is it has you set, and I understood it better after the presentation, which is always a sign of a good presentation and maybe a bad business plan. It guides you. You set it up with things you want to achieve. I want to listen to this podcast 5 hours a week. I want to read this many articles this week. When you're not doing one of those behaviors, it pops up a reminder saying, hey, here's the podcast you wanted to listen to. Did you want to hit that right now? So it's trying to reinforce positive behavior instead of restrict negative behavior. Which again, as a concept, I buy. I get it. I don't think there's a business there, but I get it.
This was the one that you were talking about to me about Calm. The Calm
app. No, Calm. Yes, and no. When I mentioned Calm before, it was because the nutritional monitor guys had compared themselves to Calm. And had said that they were going to grow twice as fast as Calm.
Yeah.
That's where Calm came up. But you're right. This and what the nutritional monitor guys brought up, and it was brought up by other judges, were things like Noom, Noom, which I'm sure you've seen commercials for. Calorie Mama, other things like that, other apps that do nutrition. And what they said was, listen, and we're back to the nutritional monitor one for a minute. They said, all those things are more restrictive or calorie counters. We focus on 4 main pillars, and the 4 main pillars didn't make much sense to me, and they certainly didn't describe them. But they were like opportunity and quality, and it wasn't necessarily counting this thing has 20 grams of calcium, this thing has 200 calories. It was more, is this the type of food you want to be eating? Is this the amount of food you want to be eating? That sort of thing.
They need geolocation, like you're at the Panda Express. That's where that was your first mistake. But yeah, I get it totally.
Oh, don't mention Panda Express. Now I'm hungry. All right. So in general, those 4 presented. We came together as a group of judges afterwards, and this was a group of 4 of us as judges. One had been like his career had been kind of like a lobbyist, and he's currently in government and corporate compliance. For IP and things like that. The other 2 were gentlemen who run startups, who run smaller businesses that are one works on video games. One's a video game company. He runs a video game company. The other one escapes me at the moment, but it was fairly decent sized companies. And generally, when we came together, the first comment that stuck out was one of them said, listen, I've done these competitions for the last 4 years. Coco Vana has been here a couple times, and that was the coconut one. He's been here a couple times. It's the same idea. Nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
So I just wonder why this thing hasn't gotten further. But at the end of the discussion, we 4 were all on the same page. There were 2 that were worthy of consideration, 2 that were not. And really, it was a case of not to disparage the companies that were there, but it was more of a case of we had to pick the least worst, because they all had flaws. And it was a case of, we don't think any of these are going to be the next billion-dollar company. Of all of these, the coconut one seems to be the one that will be successful. We just don't know how successful. And everybody was in agreement there. When we talked to the founder of it about why he'd been through the cycle so many times, he's like, listen, I've fought with Chinese companies for the last 2 or 3 years trying to get this mass produced. And a lot of times it's a case of, we'll agree on a cost, we'll get started, and then they'll triple their cost. And then I got to cancel the order and go through the process of refunds. And I've only got limited budget, so I have to wait for that refund to come back. And then I have to go search out another company to produce it. He says, I finally found one that seems to, that I've talked to other people that use them, and they seem to be solid reputation wise. The price is good. He says, I think I can get the unit cost down over time once I can visit the plant. I'm an industrial engineer by nature. So once I visit the plant, I can go there. And once we're in production, I can say, okay, why don't we do these things more efficiently? Because I'm an industrial engineer. I know how these things work. And I know that when you first produce something, there are inefficiencies in the process. You have to go see how it's done first. So again, it was solid enough that all of us were like, yeah, this is probably the most successful of all of these businesses. The medical device one might be successful, but there's nothing to prove it at the moment. It's all theoretical. A couple of the judges were, not only is it theoretical, they're going up against giants in this space that have the resources to just go do this. We don't know why. And we pushed a little, I'll let you answer that in a minute, but we pushed on them a little about that during the presentation. They're like, yeah, but they haven't done it yet. So they're kind of happy in their where they are right now.
Well, yeah, but there's a reason why the big folks haven't done it, because it doesn't serve, like, this is the problem with our entire healthcare system and research system is 20,000 cases a year. The big folks don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't push the needle. So I would say that's not a great, I don't like that judgment call of, why
I didn't either. And yeah,
do this, like, don't do this because the big people can do it. It's like, no, they don't want to. Like, they would do it.
Right. Yeah. And I did push the founders on this. I said, listen, why you? What makes you, the two of you, confident that you're the two that can put these two together that haven't been put together before? Mm-hmm. And their answer was quite simple. It was, listen, my specialization's in EEG. His specialization is in biomedical eye tracking. We have, our two specialties are in the two things we're going to be working on. I'm like, okay, well, that's a reasonable answer.
I liked those two guys. That background is where you would want to invest now, to me. The question is, can they get a third party that knows the tech implementation? Like, that's what I'd be pressing them. I could care less about the big medical company.
Yeah, and what one of the judges said was, this also sounds like it's just something you build at a university. It's something you build in a university as a research project, and then if it works, you take it to you productize it.
Yeah.
You don't go for funding first. You just go build it at a university as a research project.
I agree with that.
And how are research projects funded? I don't know, through grants and various things, I guess. Yeah. Which is fine, and that was also a fine statement. I think at the end of the day, we just felt the coconut one was ready to go. Yeah. And maybe it just needed that little push of whatever the winnings would give it to get over that hump and get into the stores and be whatever kind of business it was going to be.
Yeah.
So that's the vote we had. And at the end of the day, the guy who had said he had been through a few of these before. He's like, these are 4 of the weaker ones I've seen over the years I've been here. So I don't expect whoever we pick to win. However, the coconut one actually won the overall competition. So we judged it as best out of our group. It went on to a Final Four, and it was judged as best out of the group of Final Four. So he ended up with a check for $25,000, and it split 12-5, 12-5 based on milestones. But it's enough to get him going, I think. I also reached out to him separately because I'm an investor. I'm an investor in an angel syndicate fund where I can invest for $1,000, $2,000 in a bigger idea that a bunch of people get together and put $1,000, $2,000 towards.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, if you want, I'll introduce you to this syndicate fund, and we can maybe they'll be interested in funding you. I just don't know if you're big enough, but I have to ask them that question first. And at first he was like, yeah, that might be interesting. And then after he won, he's like, this might be enough money for me to go build it. And then let's have the conversation, because then I'll have something that I can show.
The question
as
I have
far
about
as products.
Did anyone ask about the copycat risk? Despite these patents
Yes.
are only enforceable if you
Yes.
have money. Like, what's that risk?
Yeah, it was asked. His answer essentially was yes. There's nothing I can do to prevent that. There's nothing to prevent that in China. The only thing I can do is make a high quality product, because copycats usually aren't high quality.
Yeah.
They're usually lower quality and they'll break easier. And he held up the one he used to open the coconut. He's like, this thing's opened 900 coconuts. This specific one. So it's going to last forever.
Mm. Here's a dumb question. Can you grow coconuts in Florida?
South Florida, yeah.
Okay. So there's like farms of coconut farms in Florida.
Yeah. And he talked about, this is something you want to target at the Latin market, the Asian market.
Yeah.
It certainly is more popular in South Florida than it is in Orlando. He said every Whole Foods in the United States carries Thai coconuts. Not every grocery store in the United States carries coconuts at all, but certainly every Whole Foods carries Thai coconuts. And most grocery stores in Central and South Florida carry coconuts as well. So it may be localized, but again, he was talking to Kroger. Kroger's not in Florida.
Yeah.
And Kroger's like, yeah, I want these next to our coconuts. So obviously they have it elsewhere too.
Yeah.
That was the biggest question, I think, from the other biggest question from the other judges was, I don't see this. I'm not going to go buy 24 coconuts. I'm sitting around and me opening a coconut and drinking out. It's not, to me, that's, yes, you have to feel the product yourself a little, but it does not have to apply to me for me to see that there is a product there.
Yeah. Well, going back to the original discussion we had, the way that the documents that you reviewed looked versus the presentations, were they all in alignment on quality? Or did someone come up, you're like, oh, they were much better in person, but their document didn't represent it because
all the presentations were of decent quality. I can't step out and say that any were better than the others. They were all fairly solid, which again speaks to me that maybe the written business plans were kind of pushed aside for the lower two as less important than the presentations. Because again, the presentations were all fine. They were all fairly professionally done. They all, all the spelling errors and grammar stuff and all the stuff, there's not as much internal consistency that you're looking for in a presentation because there's not as much information. But there were no glaring holes in any of the presentations besides the things I'd already mentioned as question marks.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but overall, it went fine, and like I said, and to wrap it all up, if you remember the very first one I talked about, which was the digital device, the digital relationship wellness app
Yeah.
movement, so on and so forth. I told them during our question and answer session, I said, "Listen, you guys, out of all the written business plans, you guys are the ones that sucked me in the most. As far as I didn't believe in your idea when I glanced at it at first. By the end of it, you had your passion came through, and
Yeah.
you had sold me on the idea of something, but I don't know that you have a business here." And sure enough, when they did all the awards, they were the ones that got $1,000 check for Entrepreneurial Spirit Award.
Mm-hmm.
And I said this in the last episode. These guys are going to do something, and it's going to be a successful business. I just don't think this is it.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, yeah, I'm a segueing already to a different side conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what the COVID, like where small business and entrepreneurship goes from here. Because I'm sitting here, I'm more worried about the healthcare system and having healthcare than I am about, can I find a way to make salary?
Right.
Not because I can't make the salary and pay for healthcare, but because where I live has no good ACA options, like zero in Kansas. So, and then
Yeah.
we're in a healthcare related boom and bust. So, what I'm curious about is on this, we're talking about these entrepreneurships and startups. Are will you get better? Like, if someone remarked that these were the lower quality candidates they've seen, does that reflect what we're going to see 3 to 4 to 6 months from now? Are people going to like enter from the employment sector into startup land, or is everyone going to say, well, it doesn't matter, if everything goes to crap, the system won't protect me? Or do people like get an energy up like the nutrition folks? Like, I don't know where all this leads us in that startup space.
Yeah, and to put context around it, this contest started probably back in December, January.
Yeah.
Is when all of this started. So I don't know that it had that much effect on these, because I think they said they had 150 ideas at first, and then it was whittled down to 64, and then it was whittled down to 16. Um, so I don't think we've seen that impact yet, but I think there is an impact. I mean, you and I have talked about two different ideas, or two different problems that we didn't necessarily have the solution for yet, but
Yeah.
maybe there were businesses to build around it. We just weren't sure yet that are both directly related, but we also think could exist in a future that is unaffected or has been changed by COVID-19, either or.
So these presentations are
Um,
all Zoom, right?
yes.
So did anyone do anything unique for a video presentation?
No, and I wouldn't necessarily expect anybody to. These are, at the end of the day, these are college students, not a ton of experience, and
Oh,
probably not a ton of experience in Zoom.
I'm just asking about if you saw innovation on the presentation. Like, has anyone started to figure out, well, what's a better way to stand out in this format and this delivery channel for because normally this would be in a panel in front of a bunch of people, right?
Right. Right.
So
And I think I mentioned the only one that I thought was just a little different, and that was the guy opening the coconut in front of us. That was pretty much it.
yeah, and
And yeah,
I picture
it felt
Shark
very
Week.
Shark Tanky. Yeah, it
Shark
felt
Tank.
very Shark Tanky.
I picture Shark Week. I pictured Shark Tank, but I guess here's another idea, business idea. I'm just talking to you out loud as we record this. Is So where do we go from here? If we're all living in this remote world where video conferencing is going to probably evolve, how do we improve on presentations that need to present a personal experience and data
Mm-hmm.
that goes beyond, that includes video, PowerPoint, like any which way, like how, like where, how do you stand out in that? Whether it's backgrounds, green screen, like from my living room, not as impressive. From another environment, as I present, different. How do I
Well,
do?
I will say of all of them, one of them had a virtual background like you see on Zoom.
Yeah.
But that's just a virtual background. To me, that's not fancy.
What are the presentations that people do that are like so stuck up feeling all the time? They used to be considered like everyone was copying Steve Jobs for these things, and they're about making movements of the world.
Sure, sure.
Like I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But that's what I want. I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how do people move to a virtual presentation world that stands out and lands and closes, that kind of thing.
Well, I tell you what, I do. So for my football officiating, I'm starting to get into the world of college officiating. So I've been watching a lot of college officiating webinars, and a group of officials have put together a virus virtual clinic, and they're probably at least 20 presentations in right now, and they are rock solid. I will tell you, one of the worst things about webinars is watching video on a webinar.
Yeah.
But these guys have figured out that if you have the video on your device, it's not a secret, but it's something you have to know. If you have the video downloaded to your computer and then stream it, it's a heck of a lot clearer and a heck of a lot less jumpy than if you're trying to pull it off YouTube and then restream it.
TED Talks.
That doesn't work.
That's what I'm trying to say.
TED Talks is what you're trying to say, but these they have good, nice, clean videos. They have polls in the middle of the videos, so everybody's interactive. They bring in the chat room as well. They bring in questions from the chat room. They engage in the chat room. So these guys have got that format fairly well figured out. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's necessarily a lot there as far as what are we going to see unique, because if you go too unique, you turn people off most of the time. But these certainly feel like feels like the way online education should be. And they've done a real good job of it. And they do good hour and 15-minute presentations that keep you engaged.
I feel like you need to do it where, like, if you watch the people that are acing YouTube with green screens and dynamic backgrounds, they're able to go in and kind of edit stuff. But if you can have that Martha Stewart counter presentation with a green screen background that changes to show the data, high quality video, and you're able to take questions, that's what I'm thinking stands out, but I don't know.
Yeah, very well could be. Or you just have Post Malone play Nirvana for an hour, which was a fine concert, by the way. I have not been a big fan of Post Malone, but the concert he did doing Nirvana, my wife and I were playing a game last night. We had that going on in the background, and it was great.
You didn't have to look at the tattoos.
That was part of why it was great, because it was just audio, not visual. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that what you described is probably the best way to do it. It's non-obtrusive and it's useful in that format, and I'm sure we'll see people doing it that way. I mean, heck, the TV news has done a good job of doing that, because a lot of these anchors are at home, so
Yeah.
they're doing a good job of being green screened with data behind them and things like that. So
I think the key to a good presentation is not winging it, not just saying whatever comes off the
well,
top of
yeah,
your head. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, disinfectant use cases and stuff like that. Like, that's where you get
yeah,
yourself
stuff
in
like
trouble.
that.
That's where you should
Yeah.
not do that. All right, that's enough.
So yeah, so that was pretty much it, and I thought it was interesting to walk through these and talk about what made these plans good, and what makes a good business, and what are indicators of success, or questions I might have about potential future success.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah. All right, so let's I had a call earlier this morning. Everybody asked what we did this weekend. I said I went out clubbing, which is obviously not what I went out and did. But I guess
What
for
did you
this week,
club? Like, did you beat? They have no baby seals in Florida.
I did not. I did not. No. But no, we'll all stay in our homes for a little while longer, and hey, maybe we'll kick out a few business ideas while we're at it.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
some code as well.
Cool, man.
All right. Well, stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
Later.
Thanks for listening to This Old App. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at www.thisoldapp.online. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. For questions, comments, or things you would like to hear on future shows, please email us at hello@thisoldapp.online. Show music is Guns Blazing by Fab Claxton, licensed by Pond 5. Voiceover work by MeganVoices.com. You'll hear from us soon.